Alright guys, so got a little different of a view here for the axle video. So had a comment, a viewer said that he got a set of these axles. These are the knockoff axles from AliExpress. I've been breaking into these, messing with them a little bit. So diving down in a little farther with these, what I ran into, he said the Rc4wd drive internals won't fit the knockoff axles, and I had switched the pinion gears and all that stuff around, and it seemed like they worked. So this is what I ran into, and this is really odd. So the front, I was able to interchange the ring and pinion gears with. When I got to this rear axle on the clone, the knockoff, the Rc4wd drive, and yes, this is the rear and this is the front. It doesn't matter. I just had one and the other one tore apart. I ran into the ring gear won't fit the rear housing, and it don't matter whether you have the front or the rear. It's the same, vice versa. He's right. It's too tight of a fit. The machining on the actual knockoff housing here is pinched in, and I mean it's like thousandths off from fitting. So what I did was here, we're going to start here with the knockoff. I can't see there being, he says his stripped out really easy. Primarily it looks like it's the same, quality, ring and pinion to me. I can't, maybe his had a machining problem. I don't know. This thing is rolls smooth inside the housing. Of course, the pinion gear's not on it. The pinion gear's over here. So, we got the pinion off of the knockoff axle here, but just seems plenty smooth enough. It had grease in it, so these were greased already, so no problems with that. We'll try to move the light down here so you guys can see a little better. Maybe there was grease in these knockoff housings. You can grab this is off the Rc4wd drive. This is the pinion setup. Also runs smooth and true on that ring gear. So the pinions definitely will work back and forth between them. So they get slopped into the right place. Flop back over. So they work. The cones and everything interchanged. Screw holes lined up for me. I'm going to set this over here because this is the Rc4wd drive. This is the knockoff. So to get your rear axle apart, you have these small 1/5 screws that hold your axles in here. So I went ahead and pulled them out so we can pull our axles out. Just like that right there. Bearings aren't anything to write home about. They're just about the same quality bearing as what you'd see in an Rc4wd drive housing. We're going to go ahead and slide that one out. You got a bearing here on the outside shaft, and it's not a sealed bearing, just a, regular, looks like an Rc4wd drive bearing. So that's your internal axles out of your clone. So we're going to pop this ring gear out. And it just comes right out just like that right there. Same way, not sealed bearings. They're just normal, whatever you run of the mill, just your bearings. I mean, this is the ring gear out of the clone. We're going to take the ring gear. We've already pulled the axles out of the Rc4wd drive. We're going to pop it out of the housing here. Just like that right there. And I am missing, I don't have the bearing on that side of it. So this is your RC4 drive ring gear. This is the clone housing right here. So we're going to, there is the ring gear in from the RC 4-wheel drive into the clone housing. The problem runs into, what I did was, is if you want to end up running these ring gears, which RC 4-wheel drive gears aren't really that, like, nothing to ride home about, like they're that great anyways. They're okay. I can't really say that there's, you know, RC 4-wheel drive, clone, not a huge difference between the two looking at them. Really can't hardly see a difference in them whatsoever. So I took the RC 4-wheel drive, and what I did was I just machined down the little bit of material that it took to fit the ring gear down inside that, because it's thousandths, I mean thousandths from fitting. So you can take the RC 4-wheel drive ring gear and the pinion and swap all that stuff over into your clone housing. Now, what you'll run into here is when you take this down, and I took this side down just a smidge, and this side down just a smidge, and it doesn't hurt anything. It will fit right back down into your RC 4-wheel drive housing, vice versa. What you'll run into is you're going to have a problem. You'll put your bearing, and the bearings interchange too, by the way. So the problem you're going to run into, this is the RC 4-wheel drive ring gear. This is the clone knockoff housing. Even once you machine down the RC 4-wheel drive housing, you are like, with the bearings on it, you are just like, man, very minuscule of going into your knockoff housing. So you can see here, it's not going to go in. Pop your bearing back off, goes right in. So what I came up with, somebody gets these knockoffs. If you do blow blow it up, what you can do is, and once again, here you go, without the bearing attached, goes in here, spins completely freely, no issues, no binding. There's a couple different ways you could go about doing this. So this tapered flat edge right here, if you can take you something in here where you can make sure this stays machined flush down and grind this inside down a little bit to where that bearing will sit down on your, RC 4-wheel drive ring gear, you could do that. These machine down really easy. So you could even maybe take an emery board and file that to where this bearing would sit recessed up a little bit farther onto this ring gear. And then it would fit in, everything would interchange with each other. Because it is just, I barely hit this with the file. That's all I did, was just filed this flat, made sure my file was staying flat across it, to get the bearing, or to get this inside this housing. So I don't know if maybe I can get a same bearing a little thinner. That might be a possibility for somebody that wants to try that. Yeah, it's just the bearing is just, it's the bearing hangs out too far. So here is your clone ring gear. and it'll slop right back down, you know, in your... these things got nice tolerance in them, guys. I don't know. He said his blowed apart in the first run. I don't know if he broke the front or the rear. You might comment. We're going to be testing these out in that build, and I'm going to run them for as long as they will. And I have a set of Rc4wd drive axles here on standby. But, yeah, that is a problem, but you can get around that. Another thing you can do, too, is you can come in here with a file, and you can just machine this down with a little bit with a file on whatever side you need to machine down. So you can machine this down with a file if you want. This is just aluminum. It'll machine down fast, so just do a little bit. Because all you need is just, and I mean it is minuscule clearance to get, you know, this down in here with your bearing. So, yeah, it's just crazy that with the bearings, it fits in there and there's no binding and it rolls free. It's really odd that it screws up with, you know, if you have like a, you could still use these knockoffs if you wanted to use them. Another thing we'll get into here, I was looking here at this inside piece. So you got, like I said, the Rc4wd drive does not have the outside screws that hold the axle in. The rear axles do fit in the Rc4wd drive ring gear. So you can run the clone axles if you want in the Rc4wd drive. So all that interchanges. Strange thing, the front does not. But both of these will go in here and lock in your... So there's the clone actual internal axles inside of the Rc4wd drive ring gear. Okay. They both interlock about the same, you know, you get about the same tight. They're the same fit. They don't go in any farther depth than one or the other. I've gauged them. So you don't have any problems there. The axles are interchangeable. I think these are maybe a little better, heavier duty than the Rc4wd drive, the actual axles. So you got that. Another strange thing I found, the front does not work in the clone. So your front stub axles from Rc4wd drive, which doesn't make any sense to me, I couldn't get them to lock into the... I'll grab one here real quick. Okay, so we have a Rc4wd drive front axle. This is your stub axle out of the long side here. So this is the Rc4wd drive ring and pinion. Stub axle goes right in and locks into the Rc4wd drive, of course, as it should. This is your clone. And this is what I found really odd. Will not fit either side. Okay? Will not lock. Your front won't. But the rears, clone, knockoff, whatever you want to call it, lock. I can get it out of here, Rc4wd drive. Lock. So the rear axles, it doesn't make any sense. They're the same. They machined them the same. But your front will not go in to your clone. Like that. They're not interchangeable. Will not lock. I found that like to be crazily weird. Now once again you can file these down because this is the difference in the axles here. If I can get it to focus and not move around. And I know my light's not real good. So we're talking like thousandths off. So you could just come in here with a file and file your, if you wanted to put CVDs in the front of the clone that are RC 4-wheel drive, all you'd have to do would be to file this down just a hair bit to get it to fit. So, just more strangeness to me. I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. When it comes to that, the rears interchange. The fronts don't. I don't know. I don't get it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, yeah. Like I said, if you wanted to swap ring gears, you wanted to put the RC4 drive in the knockoff, you're going to have to do some machine work. Like I said, you know, file. A little bit of filing here. Wouldn't be nothing. Because we're talking like paper from the bearing clearing. So that's what I ran into with these. I just wanted to do a, you know, kind of a quick video. Plus I got to be into these clones to grease and Loctite everything. So I figured I'd go ahead and do a video of it to begin with. The, you know, pinion has the same style snap ring. That holds like as the RC4 drive that's on the clone. Once again, the housings have really nice machine work, in my opinion, for what they cost. Done to them. The bearings aren't nothing, you know, no fantastic. There's no severe in and out of play here on your cone. There's very, very little. The RC4 drive one is, of course, these are really worn. There's no snap ring on this one. But, you know, there's hardly any, you know, about the same amount of play on the RC4 drive versus the, you know, clone. These axles, these ring and pinions have tons of runtime on this RC 4-wheel drive. I figured I'd have way more wear on that because this came out of my TF3. You know, and everybody says shim the RC 4-wheel drive. I've never had to shim them. Let's put that out there. So I'm just going to assemble the clone axles. Now that I know I can modify this housing if I have to on the clone to fit the internals, because I've got extra internals. You know, and vice versa axles and all that stuff. I know all that stuff will interchange now. A little bit of work to them. But anybody out there that's looking into that, there is that difference with the knockoffs and the RC 4-wheel drives. But it can be made to fit with a little bit of modification. So, you know, it's no big deal if you have a broken front housing and you buy those clones and you would blow the gears out of it. A little bit of modification and you can get the RC 4-wheel drive internals in it. You just, you know, you're either modifying, you're going to have to modify your ring gear a little bit. And I mean, it's very minuscule, guys. It's seconds of file to get that down in it. And then you're going to have to come up with, probably I would recommend just filing your housing a little bit. Would be real easy to do. I'm not doing it because unless these break. But you can file in here just really lightly, as long as you can get that, you know, bearing to go sit flush down in here, you know, because once you pinch your axles in, we'll put our axles back in our knockoff here real quick, just like that right there, and that side, and then we're going to move this over here so we're more centered, and then your other axle on this side. Man, these things are just so smooth. I can't understand why he said his blowed out that easy unless it's just super soft material that the ring gear and stuff's made out of. But, you know, you can't interchange all this stuff, guys. I wanted to, you know, do this whole, you know, process of breaking everything down. We're going to conclude this video. I'm going to grease this bad boy up. We're going to Loctite everything together. Yeah, everything is just smooth to me. Unless there's some kind, his had some kind of binding in it. I don't understand why you would strip out like that. And we're going to chuck this thing up in the drill, the cordless drill, and we're going to spin it with wheels and tires on it with rotating mass and see if we can break anything before we even put them under. But I don't think there's going to be any issue. But for anybody that's interested, you can swap your... Got Dusty Rhodes over here drinking. Can't work with anybody. You can swap all that stuff. You're just going to have to do a little bit of work to your knockoff housing, and it just depends on what kind of fabrication skills or whatever you're willing to do. If I had a broken housing and I bought these for like $35, I think the front one's $35. I would modify a $30-some housing before paying. I think Rc4wd drives like $60-70 for a complete front end, I think. So I would, try it. I think it'd be worth it. A little bit of, filing, however you want to do it. That's just what I would recommend doing. But they are swappable with a little bit of work to them. So I just wanted to do this little video here because I'm trying to cover the whole build with everything. Like I said, we're trying to do everything as budget as we can and still stay dependable. Also, some people do a lot of harder stuff with, this is primarily going to be more of a scale trailing truck. So, everybody blows apart the Rc4wd drive stuff too. It seems like online. I've wore one out, but I didn't blow it into pieces. The only thing I've broken on the Rc4wd drive has been these, splitting these open. And once I put XVDs in it, I didn't have a problem. But I just thought I'd share that with you guys to, show you. You can interchange these. Also for that guy, that viewer, RC Brother, you can interchange these. Sorry the camera's moving. I've got a terrible mount made up right now. But it's the only way I could do it here. I had to move to a different table to work. You can do this to get them interchanged with a little bit of work. It takes some filing, sanding on your Rc4wd drive ring. Put it all together. You should be good to go. Yeah, I can't see anything else. So from the RC Dungeon, I just thought I'd share everything. Remember, when you get whatever axles you get, you always need to go through them. Make sure everything is meshed properly. If you have to shim them, you need to shim them. This rear one didn't need shimmed. It was nice and buttery smooth. Sometimes I've gotten Rc4wd drive axles that were a little notchy too. A lot of guys shim them. I've never had to shim the Rc4wd drive ones yet. And I've got tons of drive miles on a lot of trucks. So, I just wanted to start getting this video together because I want to get this project underway because I've got several other small projects on the side I've got to take care of. So, yeah, that's the Rc4wd drive and the knockoffs and what you might expect to run into if you're trying to interchange parts. It is possible. Don't give up hope. From the RC Dungeon. Peace. Alright guys, so we've came to our conclusion with our axles here. These knockoffs, I'm going to say run at your own risk, in my opinion. Do I think they're an absolute terrible axle? I haven't ran them yet. Just bench running them, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So, you can see here, I mean, other than the tires being, they're glued old, just, wheels and tires, plastics that I use for testing purposes. So, you can see they roll pretty smooth. What I ran into with this after assembling everything, greasing it, and you can actually grab it with your fingers and just spin this thing. I ended up having to take the shims out of both of the left and right axles here in the rear. And like I said, this is just the rear axle. I haven't tied into the front yet. So, every once in a while, I still run into, it seems like maybe some binding. So we got our cordless drill. This is what I do a lot with my axles here when I'm bench testing. You want to run an axle. I mean, they run pretty smooth and true. decent. You get a little bit of the back and forth there. There's that catch. All right, we're going to go back the other way. Hang them down. That was my bad. So, most of the time I try to get an axle to where it won't do that. It won't spin around. Because that means you've got slight binding somewhere. And you can stick one finger here on this one axle just lightly and hold it. And we've got the weight, all the weight setting down on the pinion. You can see the direction it wants the torque spin. You can actually reverse spin it the opposite direction. So there's not like terrible binding or anything like that with them. But they're not as smooth as an Rc4wd drive Yota 2 axle. And then we'll go back the other way here. But you can see they will start getting themselves, they'll start spinning. You know, and if you have them sitting like they would sit in the truck, they won't totally get the momentum enough to where, you know, they'll flop all the way around. I ran these in the cordless drill quite a bit there. I do that with a lot of my axles. Do I think that they're worth 50, 60 bucks? I don't know, man. I think you'd be better, in my opinion, to get on eBay and buy like one of the takeoffs. The Rc4wd drive, like the Marlin takeoffs, if you're needing Yota 2s, or because I think they're around 110 bucks, and you get the XVDs in the Marlin. There's a guy I know that sells them for that, because you don't get XVDs in these axles. And I mean, I'm gonna make them work in the build and see how long they hold up and last. And you can see they run fairly smooth. If you can pick these up like I did for around 40 bucks, I think they're probably okay, worth it. Because you do get your link mounts that you can use later on if you want to link, a different truck. So you do get some link mounts and stuff that's usable, some different, different mounting position stuff. So it's probably worth what I paid for them, to be honest with you, for that. You can see here. They're okay axles, guys. I just, I had to take the factory shims out. Like I said, the shims that go in, we'll take the wheels and tires off here. It's the shims that go on your actual, behind the bearing, because it was shoving the axle, it was just too tight. It was way too tight, was causing binding. I'm not going to recommend that you actually, you know what I mean? I'm going to tell you to buy the actual Rc4wd drive axles. If I was you and you're looking, just wait, get the money together for your build. Or, if you got the money, I couldn't afford it. I would have bought a set of BRX, the Boom Racing axles for the BRX trucks. If you got the extra money to blow out on a build, I was doing a budget build for this truck. So I would recommend maybe getting the boom axles, instead of these. That's just my 2 cents for what it's worth. Not that these are terrible, but I did end up having to pull these, shims out of here to get them to not bind. And the front axle seems like it runs truer and smoother to me than the rear one does. So I'm going to open this thing up here real quick and see because I've ran quite a bit of on the cordless drill. So let's see here. I need to change out my towels because I'm getting grease all over me. So And when you're putting these together, normally I pack my differentials and stuff with grease, and it's never caused any of a problem. I noticed the more grease that was added in here, it kind of made them bind up a little bit more. So, like I said, guys, you know, no offense to anybody, and you know how I run clone stuff in a lot of my rigs and stuff, but these, yeah, I'm not real 100% on. So, I would have gotten the clone Vanquish F10 whatevers and tried to make them work on this build, but there's enough problems with this build as it is, and I didn't want a wide axle because those axles are way wider. So we're just gonna take a real quick look right here on our ring gear. Our ring gear looks pretty good in there. I don't see any abnormal. There's no chipping. No, it's running right almost in the middle where it should be. I know you can't see it on camera. I'm looking at it here though. Yeah. So I don't, you know what I mean? Yeah, we'll see how long she lasts. We're gonna put this thing back together, and then we're gonna put them on under the build, and we'll be sending it and see how well they hold up, so everybody will know in the long run. But yeah, would not work with these shims. They were binding up once you tightened everything up with the shims in it. So that's something you might want to, you know, be aware of with this, guys. So from the RC Dungeon, that's it for our knockoffs and interchangeability of everything. I hope everybody enjoyed the video. I didn't get it too long. Peace.